the way my life isn't good or like could be better.
Growing up teen mom, I did what I had to do to survive, but it was a struggle. But I think that it also built my character.
I grew up in poverty. We actually lost our house to the bank at one point, one paycheck away from homelessness. My marriage failed. Photography became my lifeline. Your past does not predict your present, and your present does not predict your future.
Today, we're joined by Kara Mergl, a powerhouse in policy and advocacy and a creative entrepreneur whose work has been featured on CNN. Kara brings over 20 years of experience helping communities by working on issues like making sure families have safe and stable homes, access to healthy food, and support kids need to grow up strong. She's widely recognized for building solutions that bring people together and create real impact. But Kara's story doesn't stop there. She also runs a thriving photography business that helps entrepreneurs and female-founded brands build trust and grow their business with visual storytelling. Her journey from growing up in poverty to earning 2 master's degrees and building a successful business is nothing short of inspiring. Today, Kara is here to share her insights on leadership, resilience, and how women can turn big dreams into reality.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Pauline. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm so happy that you're here as well. So, what first sparked your passion in making a difference in people's lives?
So we're going to go back to the early 80s in my hometown in Western Pennsylvania. Growing up, things were a struggle. I would say I remember being young, like 4 or 5 years old, and really thinking like something's not quite right. And I don't know how, as a 4 or 5-year-old, you recognize that moment, but just kind of understanding the way my life isn't good or like could be better. In retrospect, I think it had a lot to do with mental illness in the family. I think it had a lot to do with, 80s, growing up in the 80s, sort of in Western Pennsylvania, these were dying steel towns. The economies weren't good. And just really being surrounded by poverty. And that moment of really saying something could be better, I think that really carried me really far. And that passion, or maybe you call it a calling, was very early. It was a very early marker for me to say, I want something better for myself, and I want to make sure other people who are having the same experience have something better too. And I think that really, set a foundation for really a lifetime of work at this point, from early days of like volunteering to becoming a social worker to working with members of Congress. But really that was set very, very early on in my life. And I think to some extent we were fortunate. I had grandparents who helped us. I believed in Santa Claus way longer than I should have, simply because, we would have Christmas gifts and things like that. But still sort of seeing those moments and saying, somebody cares here, but also understanding that things weren't right, and that there were other people who were having these experiences as well. And so, just I think being very young and having some clarity from a very young age of like, this is how I wanted to spend my life. And that's really what's propelled me now professionally and, even I think personally in my free time, how I spend my time and the types of things that I do has really set that path for me. Yeah.
What role has education played in your life?
Yeah. So, going back to those early days, I think I was fortunate that school was a safe place for me. And so I associated that, with like just kind of saying to myself, okay, if I can get good grades, if I can, do something here, where there were teachers who cared about me and things that I really enjoyed doing, um, then that was a pathway out. That was a way for me to find a different opportunity, from sort of, a really, like I said, like a dying steel town of the 80s, and then growing up in the 90s and, being in high school and really understanding um, that my education was an opportunity. And that, again, I think like really created then that next stage of my life. I was really focused on like, again, like if I can just get good grades. And luckily I did, I was a good student. I was involved in school. And so that afforded me opportunities, college scholarships. Um, I was able to move far away and kind of start my life over again as a 17, 18-year-old going to school. And then that, I think, continued. Um, went to school. I actually, college, I stayed 5 years. I said that to my nieces recently. I was like, I did 5 years of college, and they went, 5 years, like almost as if like it should only take 4 years. Like there's a prescription here. And I was like, "Yeah, that's to get that out of your mind, right?" Like I went for 5 years. I got a second degree, in undergraduate in art history of all things, just simply because I enjoyed it and it was important to me. Um, and then I went on to get my master's degrees. And this, I think, was like the really pivotal moment for me. Again, like going back to what do I do with my life? How do I sort of take all of those things that little Kara experienced and little Kara really struggled with, um, and apply it? And there was this, I think, pivotal moment, which comes back up now all these years later as an entrepreneur and, business owner. But there was this moment in my early 20s where I was saying to myself, well, I really enjoy art and I really enjoy photography, and I could go do that. I could go be an artist. Um, and I became a social worker instead.
Right.
And I think that, at that time, that was the pull and the obligation I had. And being in social work school, where I got my master's in social work, I was also afforded the opportunity during my second year in school to be a social worker. The university I was attended opened a social policy program, and I think this became the like real moment where it became like real for me, I guess. I had been at the time also working in a homeless shelter in Philadelphia as a social worker, as a clinician, and I was not good at it. It is hard work. It's very emotional. It's also very triggering. You're all of the women that I was working with at the time. It was a homeless shelter, but it was only for women, and all the women were in recovery from some form of addiction. Many of them were coming to us from jail or prison, and you would hear about their struggles, and that would be a trigger to go, oh gosh, yeah, they've been through it, and I can understand that because I've maybe been through that as well to some extent, right? And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So when the opportunity came to sort of specialize in something that would still allow me to sort of stay on that path to helping people, but knowing that I couldn't be a therapist, I couldn't do that. I got a policy degree, and really my career since then has been focused on policy change, advocacy, really working in communities, helping to give them a voice to be able to speak up, working in the child welfare system and trying to create reform so the children can stay with their families, or their families can get help rather than having them being separated, things like that. But it was that pathway through my education, and really, and to be clear, I will be paying for my education until I'm in my mid 50s. So
The depth sentence.
yes. Yeah. So I feel like some people think like education is unattainable, or, it's expensive, and it is expensive, but it was important to me, and it set me on this path, while at the same time creating this safe space between sort of my early years through my early 20s, until I really figured out who I was and how to ground myself, I think.
How did the financial hardship shape the way that you lead today?
Yeah. So, in the spaces that I work in, having lived experience, that's sort of the term we use, lived experience, is really important, right? And we talk a lot about how important it is for the people who are impacted by whatever the issue is. So if it's poverty, currently I work in the field of homelessness. I work on um, helping to write legislation, advocate for, increases to budget, things like that. So there's a little, I shared with you earlier this week that we're very close to, having a win with the federal budget. So I work with members of Congress.
Can you tell us about your win?
So yes, so I'm gonna tell you about it, but also say there's one vote left before it's final.
Okay.
So I as I said to my my coworkers this week, I took a 30-second celebration and then I kept working. But we, several months ago, the federal government announced a pretty significant change to the way they fund homeless services, essentially. And the change was really a 180 from how they have worked quite literally for 15 plus years. And communities were scared. It would have really led to hundreds, thousands of people, close to 200,000 people being homeless, and some as early as next week, right? And that's how quickly this changed. They made this announcement technically in November. We were learning about it in September, where we were sort of catching wind. It hadn't been formally announced. And we spent between September and quite literally the end of last week advocating for Congress to pass a bill that would slow down the change and give communities an opportunity, rather than evict somebody because all of a sudden the funding wasn't there, to work with philanthropists, work with state leadership, transition people to another resource, who the resources we're talking about are things like rental assistance, where somebody is stably housed. They were probably homeless at one point and received rental assistance, came in, created some stability in their life, maybe are accessing services to help them with their mental health or some behavioral health issue. And it was just a pretty significant change. And after months, quite literally months, of working with members of Congress, but also members of Congress want to hear from people in their communities. So this really turned into talking to people in Arkansas, talking to people in Washington, talking to people really all over Florida, all of these places, and saying, okay, you go talk to your members too. And here's what you can say, and here's what you can take them. And earlier this week, the federal government, I don't know who pays attention. I'm a nerd like this, so I pay attention to these things. But the federal government, they're going through their annual budgeting process, and they released the housing budget, and included in that was the language that we had been asking them to include since September. And that, I mean, is a huge victory. Is the language perfect? No. Is it 100% of what we wanted? No. Is it 75% of what we wanted? Yeah. And that makes a huge difference. So we have one more vote left next week, not anticipating that it won't happen, but one more vote next week. And then we're safe. We're safe for now. And there's still more work to do. There's always more work to do. But that, I mean, that's like a really specific example of, sort of the work that I do now and how, having been in a place where I'm quite literally one paycheck away from homelessness, as a college student, I'm like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? When the dorms close, right? And so I went to college in Pennsylvania. First time ever on Long Island was my summers in college. I would come out to Shelter Island and work at a summer camp. And so then I'd have somewhere to stay. I didn't have to worry about what would happen. Or I would stay at school during the summers and do research with a professor, something like that. And so that understanding of I'm one paycheck away. I grew up in poverty. We actually lost our house to the bank at one point, and had to move. And so having an experience of I feel that, right? It's not just like, oh, I have sympathy, right? Or I have empathy.
You have living experience.
But it is a real experience of understanding poverty, understanding mental illness, understanding the things that affect people or affect the parents and families. These weren't just individuals; they were elderly individuals, their families with young children, all this kind of stuff. And you're like, yeah, I get it. That's a really scary. And you could talk to my colleagues. I am not an emotional person. And I cried very publicly in front of my coworkers this week, because having that real understanding, and then the amount of work that went into this, and then to see okay, we have a moment that we can catch our breath, and hopefully by the time this podcast comes out, that vote will be done, right, and we will be able to celebrate. But yeah, it's that all of the years that little Kara and the years that I was in school and really becoming the person who I am today still is with me and informs all of this work every single day. So yeah, it's definitely important to me.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And I hope your blessings come tenfold.
Thank you.
So you have a successful photography business that was featured in CNN. What sparked the interest in photography?
Yeah. So I actually started photography when I was in school. This idea of I could be an artist. It was something that kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't realize that I had any artistic ability. And then I had my high school teacher in my last term in high school was like, that drawing's not too bad. Have you thought about going to art school? And I'm like, no, that's never been on my radar, right? And so the college that I went to was ended up being a really great. I didn't even plan it this way, but ended up being really great that you could take art classes and become part of, the art community without having submitted a portfolio. And so I just fell in love with photography. I saved up. I bought a old camera, from 1982. So by this time, it's probably 2001. Old, really shitty camera. There was film. This was before really fancy digital and film. I worked in a photography lab, mixing the chemicals, developing film, took every single photography course that I could possibly take. And then, like I said earlier, I went and became a social worker. And, for years.
It's like you're calling. It was
yeah.
there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. For years, photography was for me. I loved it. There was a period that I lived in Brooklyn for like 15 years. And during that period, there was several years that I worked for the city of New York, in the child welfare department. Just really, really a difficult job. And I would carry my camera with me, and then after work, just walk around the city and take photos and street photography, because there was so much joy in it for me, and it was very calming for me. Um, and then the pandemic hit, and everybody's life changed. And I had moved maybe about 6 months before the pandemic. I was in a new community. I didn't know anybody. My marriage failed, as many did during that time. My job, of course, I still very fortunate that I had my job. I was actually working for the same company that I'm working for today, but it was a significant shift that I went from traveling multiple times a month, um, to to nothing, just being there, and just going like, wow, I have a lot of time on my hands, and I'm in this new community. I don't know anybody, and what am I going to do? And photography became my lifeline. It was started as like, okay, it didn't start as like, I'm going to start a photography business. It started as, um, I have a camera, and there's something really interesting going on, that like everybody was adopting animals, right? Everybody was either fostering or adopting at that time, if you remember. Um, so I said, okay, maybe there's something there. And then I was thinking too, like there's working animals, so like therapy dogs. And so I just had this idea of like, what if I asked the question, like, what are working animals doing during the pandemic?
Right.
What are therapy dogs doing? Like how not only are we adopting, dogs and cats in like much higher numbers during this time, but how are they getting through the pandemic? Um, it was, kind of the late summer at that point in 2020, and I said, well, I could also use my camera, answer this question about pets and dogs, and do it outside and not be in a space and not have to, worry about that. And so it kind of just naturally developed from there, what grew into a dog photography business. It sort of progressed from there, where what was this like idea of just a way to like safely get out of my house and interact with people, and who didn't want to hang out with some dogs, during that time, really developed into what became my photography business. But also this moment of, I keep coming back to saying, like, there was this opportunity to be an artist, and then I became a social worker, right? And it was finally this moment where I could be both things, and also realizing like this real, like, aha of photography really was joy for me. It was passion. And the work that I do in advocacy and policy, that is something that I owe to little Kara. That's something that I feel almost obligated to do, because I have that experience, right? And so it's been as really interesting several years of now being the business owner and being in the space where I get to be a photographer, quite publicly, not just like throwing my camera in the bag and,
Right.
doing it for fun. But really live in that part of who I am, and find joy in that part of who I am. Um, and that's just, then I think progressed to sort of where the business is now, which is not just focused on dogs, but also focused on entrepreneurs, female founded, businesses, which there was sort of a natural transition there, where it's a lot of dog moms have started businesses, often inspired by their dogs.
Right.
And that might be dog treats, or they might be a groomer, something like that. And it's it's been this sort of natural progression from dog portraits to, and storytelling, really focusing on the relationship between dogs and their dog moms. And then transitioning that storytelling to help brands really grow and tell their story and be able to market themselves to their clients. So,
Right.
yeah.
What's one piece of advice that you would give a woman that wants to start their own business?
So, and I did this class with DBS a couple months ago, and I would say that the visuals that you're using, they're speaking to somebody. You just don't know if they're speaking to the right person, right? And so, really still thinking about the dog side of my business. I know exactly who I'm talking to. Her, I have an avatar, quote unquote avatar. Her name is Sarah. She's 41. She's 6-figure easily, AKA disposable income. I charge a lot of money for those dog photos. And she speaks a certain way. She's an elder millennial, which means certain things resonate with her. And that's who I speak to. And that's who my visuals when I'm marketing my business speak to. And so that's sort of like, if you're starting a business, and there's plenty of more, like start where you can, and all those sort of like nuggets of wisdom and how I was able to grow my business. But that very specifically from like a brand photography perspective, like you're speaking to someone, are you speaking to who you want to be speaking? And that's important for being able to set your prices at the level that you want, attract the clients that you want, attract clients that you enjoy working with, all that kind of stuff. So I don't think most, small business owners, or if you're just starting a business, I don't think they think about their visuals in that way.
Right.
And it's important. It's a reflection of your brand, for sure, and who you're attracting.
That's true. How do you define success?
At this stage of my life, it's financial stability. That doesn't mean I'm rich. It just means I have some stability. I have a retirement account. I come from generations of I'll be dead before it matters. That was the retirement plan. I have a 401k.
I have a few of those.
Yeah. Yep. I can do nice thing for my nieces. I'm very close with my nieces. We go on adventures. My niece turned 16 in October. I told her, "Where do you want to go? Let's get on a plane. Let's do something." So she and I are going to Miami next month.
Nice.
I can do nice things for them. And I can create boundaries, which might be a weird marker of success. But I think, and especially for business owners, like it's not about how much money I'm making, but again, like, can I work with the clients that I want? Do I have the luxury to work with the clients that I want?
Because people don't know how to say no, and especially
Exactly.
when you need the money, so you deal with a lot more.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I think, like, to me, those are, it's not what I'm wearing or what I'm carrying or how big the house is or anything. It's just having some almost peace in my life, and comfort. Yeah, absolutely.
Where does
Absolutely.
Fred fit in all of this?
Fred.
Let's tell them who Fred is.
Yes, Fred. So Fred is my pet. My dirty little secret is, even though I'm a dog photographer, I have a cat. And similar to the women that I serve as a dog photographer, Fred is my son. He is my child. He's very important to me. So he's my in typical like elder millennial fashion. I have a pet who I consider my child.
So if you can leave our listeners with a piece of advice, what would it be?
I would say, your past does not predict your present, and your present does not predict your future. Because if that did, and you knew little Kara, you wouldn't know who I am today, right? I started my photography business when I was 38. My life, my marriage had just ended. I could have said, ugh, I give up, and I am a better, stronger, more successful person than I was then, now 5 or 6 years later. So I just always, keep that in mind. Like, we have the opportunity to inform the next stage of our life, take a different direction, and start all over again if we want to.
I mean, I like the fact that you brought up the age that you kind of restarted in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, although everything came together, I feel the same way as well, because when I left corporate, I was 49 years old
Mm-hmm.
with no plan,
Mm-hmm.
but I had to do it. I
Mm-hmm.
had to. It was just not for me. I was going to end up in a really dark place that I didn't want to ever have to go back to.
Mm-hmm.
But like yourself, growing up, teen mom, 16 years old, I struggled with my own poverty. I faced poverty as well. I did try to go on public assistance,
Mm-hmm.
and at that time they were like, didn't believe that I was as poor as I was. So
Mm-hmm.
here I was, going to school, 3 jobs, was barely with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I did what I had to do to survive. Even down to when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was working 3 jobs. And at the same time, it was just something that, seeing how my family dealt with money, I was always like, I knew I didn't have that to fall back on, that's for sure. Like, my parents at 16 were like, you made your bed, you're laying on it, see you when I see you, Not saying that they weren't fully there, but they were like, you made grown girl choices, you're gonna, have to do what you have to do. My mother ended up moving back to Puerto Rico. My father stayed in New York, but it was a struggle. But I think that it also built my character, and that's why I really strongly believe in not coddling children. Like, I can be there, I can guide you, but I can't hand you anything. And I think that it's great to give people opportunities, but it's also like, you can't just hand things to people. So I think it was a blessing in disguise that I didn't get into the system of, getting the help that I needed, in a sense, because, I feel like it built my character,
Yeah.
But my father is a very hardworking man. He's still to this day 82 years old, works every day.
Wow.
But I don't want that for myself,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't want to work till I'm 83,
Yeah.
I don't want to work so hard, but I also don't want my own children to work as hard as I did, in the sense of, yes, go out there and earn, but also enjoy your children. Because I feel like
Yeah.
I blinked and my son is 33 and my daughter's 27,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Thankfully, had them young, so I'm a grandma young and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But I think I can relate to like the struggle and how it builds character and how everything then comes into natural fruition. Where now it's like, I want to give people that that hope that no matter what you've been through, it's not who you were.
Yeah.
I also do advise like younger women to like do the best that you can. Show up for yourself, but don't give up. And yeah, it's okay to feel boohoo for a little while, but you got to dust yourself off. And I think that was my survival mechanism too. Like, just
Yeah.
I got to do this. I got to do it for me, and I'm not going to be what everybody else thought I was going to
Yeah.
end up to
Oh,
be.
yeah, yeah. That's a very similar train of thought that I've had.
I was like,
yeah.
and it wasn't like I was doing it like purpose, like I'm gonna prove them wrong. It was just like, no, I know I have it in me. I knew, and it's funny. What resonated with me when you said that from a young age you knew. So from a young age, I knew like I'm leaving the house young. So people thought, oh, she must have gotten pregnant on purpose just to leave home, because my parents were really strict, and it wasn't that. It was just it happened, and but I knew from young that I was different too. Like I was just different. I had a different drive. I just knew like I have to do this for myself, and I have to do it for my kids. And what am I showing my children? So I think
How has that influenced DBS?
Designed by Sisterhood. So, well, while I was working at corporate, I had a role of doing events for
Mm-hmm.
corporate events. I had multiple hats in that organization, but one of them was doing events, and I met a lot of small businesses, and I
Mm-hmm.
saw how hard they were working,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I feel like they how could I say, they needed not like mentorship, but almost like that push that what you're doing is so important, but there's so much more that you could be doing. So like that
Mm-hmm.
push. So
Mm-hmm.
all the women that I would speak to would be like, but can you tell me more? Can I sit with you? Can you? So it
Mm-hmm.
just grew, and from one person it grew to three people. And as I was talking to the girls, we all had the similar like, who's holding us accountable though? We're the
Mm-hmm.
moms, and we tell our husbands, and I really that they're doing their own thing. Let us have a call every couple of weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and we just started out, two of us. 4 of us, 5 of us. Now we have 32 members. But when we come together, I think that's where the magic happens. And it's like you don't feel alone. You're not ashamed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like we all share our stories, and I feel like that's what's needed more, because when you're
Yeah.
in like corporate, I feel like it's just like almost like a cutthroat, like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not the same,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that you need a life outside of your day job. So
Mm-hmm.
that has also, been an outlet for the women.
Yeah.
So, and then it's, everyone has their own different needs. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like because of my various past lives, I say,
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to either get them the help that they need or help them connect to different outlooks,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes because you're in something or you think something isn't what it,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to change your mind, but
Yeah.
some people are stuck with, well, this is how my parents did it, so
Yeah.
this is where I'm
Yeah.
going to end up, or this is what happened to me, so there's no way that, my dreams can come true.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
possible for me, and
Yeah.
it really is.
Yeah. I think what I have also found really valuable about Design by Sisterhood is that, as a starting my business 5-6 years ago now, like, yeah, I can take a great photograph. Um, how do you run a business? I don't know, or like, just even like business growth, or, for me, um, I grew my business as my business grew, right?
Right.
Like, I'm
So
self-funding it.
learn
I
along the way.
started with a really old, crappy camera, and I've upgraded twice, but only when my revenue would allow me to do that. Website, what's that, right? Like, I finally invested 3 years into a web developer to set up SEO friendly, all of those, buzzwords that, and for me, that's a little bit too of like, for who've like we've had to figure things out as we've gone along. But having a community where you can also be like, well, how did you do this? Or like, what should I be thinking about? Like,
What's working for you?
all of that stuff that, who knows how to run a business, right? Unless you run a business or you go to school to learn how to run a business, which I clearly did not. Like, to me, there's value in that as well. And being surrounded by women, I think also, who like just also understand where you're coming from, right? Like, most of us are investing in our businesses. It's not like we're, have a very rich husband, or,
Right.
if there's one out there, I'm happy to open, God brothers,
Yeah.
anything like that. I'm here for that. But like, having that sense of community, and by women who are, really in it, right? And whether it's because they're moms or, like I don't have children, but, I have my own struggles. I'm working full time. I miss out on a lot of the opportunities during the week. I can't step away from my job, but I also know that, like, everybody has something that they're like struggling with, and you get that opportunity to feel supported and also not feel like you're the odd person out because everybody else is coming from
Right. It's so
their
diverse,
trust
our group.
fund or, something like that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that makes a difference. And even I've talked to two women in the past couple of weeks where they said, "Oh, I saw you post about, this networking group, tell me about it." And they're both women who are it's starting their businesses, or they make really great cupcakes. I've had those cupcakes. They're really great. And now she's turning it into a business or, doing skincare and really looking for something outside of like their family so that it's their own and they can feel connected and also feel supported in
Right.
those moments of like, well, how do I do this thing that I would have no idea how to do other than or never have to do other than the fact that I'm now running my own business.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's really important as well.
Of our round table, all of our sessions, our round tables, our network and learn events, and the way that everyone is supporting one another as well. It's not like you come and you pitch your whatever it is that you have. It's like we really are a really close knit community in that sense. I feel because you don't also have to have a business to be in the community. Odd one out, or everyone feels comfortable. And what I love is that when we do have events and they are open to the public, we do always gain a new member.
Yeah, that's true.
Through our events,
Which
and they
is how
always
I came.
Yeah.
I just came to an event and then said, "Oh,
I
maybe
like
I'll
this,
join."
the vibes. Yeah, the vibes.
Exactly.
Sabrina.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's amazing. We're 34 members now, so it's awesome. I think back in November we had about 19, so it's growing. I'm proud.
What's your next, if we're saying our past doesn't define our future or our past doesn't define our present and our present doesn't define our future, what's your future? Where are you going from here in the next 10 years with
10
DBS?
years?
Yeah, we're going 10 years.
10 years. Oh, Lord. Designed by Sisterhood will be my full time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to expand to other states and be able to make an impact, but it's like, people always say like, what's your niche or what would be the target? And I'm like, no, it's just all women. I just want to be able to help. I love it. It's my passion. I love it. It fills my cup. And that's, that's truly what I would love to be able to do that full time for 10 years, in the next 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is probably also why I was attracted to this particular group as well, because it also brings together that advocacy side of me, with the business side of me.
Yeah.
So it's a nice place to I hear you talk about the foundation that you want to start and being in a place to give back to the community, and whether that's because of a business reason or whether that's because a mom needs diapers, right, for their baby. Like all of that is really important.
Yeah.
And I think that is another unique thing about this group, where it is sort of that all encompassing. Yeah. Yeah. And really, it's like, it's so important to who I am. And I can't imagine being a part of a group that isn't at least partially thinking about how they show up in community and how they show up in certain spaces. So, yeah.
And that's why it's so important. Sisterhood.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Kara, thank you so much for being here today. I have lots of love for you. It was destined to meet. And please share your social media handles and how we find you.
Yes. So everything is my name, which is sometimes easy, but then how on earth do you spell my last name? So I'm going to assume that wherever you're seeing this video or listening to this audio, somehow my name shows up and says, today you are listening to Kara Mergl, so that you can find the exact spelling. Kara Mergl Photography. Just find that. You'll find me on Instagram. That's my main hub. You'll find my website. You'll find me on LinkedIn. You'll find everything.
Thank you for watching. If you want more information about Design by Sisterhood, you can visit us online at designbysisterhood.com. And we are on all social platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, as well as Twitter and Threads.